Welcome back in to the Catholic Catechism on Freemasonry. This is a lecture series on Freemasonry through the lights of Catholicism. I'm your instructor, David L. Gray, Master of Arts in Theology. And we begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So, the objective of this session, number 4, on Eminenti apostolatus specula, is to ground a student in the theological and political reasons why Pope Clement XII issued the first prohibition against Freemasonry. This course is going to really just be concerned about 3 sections. Download the slide as well. It's there in your classroom. Some of these slides may not translate well to the screen here, but you can read along and I'll read along for you. If you don't want to download the slides, that's fine. So this foundational course, in all the courses where we look at either the papal bull or an encyclical from a pope on the issue of Freemasonry, will be consistent in this way. First, we take a look at the fast facts about the papal bull or the encyclical itself. Then we take a look at the historical background of the document. And then we look at the areas of major contribution to the prohibition or the subject of Freemasonry, where the church is teaching, and the legacy of that document. So let's get into the fast facts about Eminenti apostolatus specula first. So the author, Pope Clement XII, he was a pope from 1730 to 1740. Very shortly after he became pope, he had fell ill. He was blind and bedridden. So he spent the majority of his papacy, 8 years of it, just blind and bedridden. But he was quite the successful pope, building aqueducts, reforming the finances of the church in Rome, and just really successful. He's quite the reformer, and quite impressive that he was blind and bedridden. The person who assisted him, as I'll talk about shortly, was his nephew, Neri, who's a cardinal. Okay. So this document was promulgated at St. Mary Major in 1738. So 2 years before he died and 8 years into his papacy. This constitution or papal bull clearly sets forth the precise reasons for how Freemasonry plots against the church, why it is a danger to the faith, and why Catholics are forbidden from joining, associating with, or promoting it by any of its dependent bodies. So Freemasonry, as we talked about in our previous courses, in its current situation, established in 1717. Okay. So here we are just 21 years later, and the Catholic Church is on top of it. The church, who usually takes quite a while to figure things out, is quite on top of this issue with Freemasonry. Pope Clement's nephew Neri, as I said, he wrote to his uncle to assure him that Freemasonry in England was merely an innocent amusement. Yet Pope Clement XII, in his papal bull here in Eminenti, makes no distinctions between Anglo, which his nephew Neri is assuring him, the Anglo Freemasonry in England, that there's no distinctions between the Anglo versus the Continental, which would have, which will be in the future more outwardly anti-Catholic. Okay. So no distinction, and this area of no distinction will be again brought up later in future papal encyclicals that we'll study in this course. Interesting that this papal encyclical, or papal bull rather, it predates the defining of papal infallibility, which doesn't happen until 1870 in the First Vatican Council. But we'll get into the qualities of this papal bull and see that, well, if it had been defined, would this papal bull fit into what we would call something that's infallible, right? An infallible pronouncement by a pope. But for now, let's just read the essential parts of an enmity. And if you have my book, you can, I'm going to start in section 1. And interesting note that because this is a papal bull, not an encyclical document, it doesn't have paragraph numbers. If you read my book, you see the paragraph numbers in parentheses. I put them there. So those aren't natural to the document itself. But let's start with number 1. Now it has come to our ears, and common gossip has been clear, that certain societies, companies, assemblies, meetings, congregation, or conventions, called in popular tongue Liberi Morati or Francs-Masons, or by any other names according to the various languages, are spreading far and wide and daily growing in strength. Men of any religion or sect, satisfied with the appearance of natural virtue, are associated with one another in union according to their laws and the statutes laid down for them, by a strict and unbreakable bond which obliges them, both by an oath on the Bible and by a host of grave penalties, to an inviolable silence about all that they do in secret together. But it is in the nature of the crime to betray itself and to show itself by this attendant clamor. Thus, these aforesaid societies or conventions have caused in the minds of the faithful the greatest suspicions, and all prudent and upright men have passed the same judgment on them as being depraved and perverted. For if they were not doing evil, they would not have so great a hatred of the light. Indeed, this rumor has grown to such proportions that in several countries, and these societies have been forbidden by the civil authorities as being against the public security, and for some time past have appeared to be prudently eliminated. Therefore, bearing in mind a great harm which is often caused by such societies or conventions, not only to the peace of the temporal state, but also to the well-being of souls, and realizing that they do not hold by either civil or canonical sanctions, since we are taught by the divine word that it is a part of the faithful servant and of the master of the Lord's household to watch day and night, lest men as these break into the household like thieves and like foxes seek to destroy the vineyard. In fact, to prevent the hearts of the simple being perverted and the innocent secretly wounded by their arrows, and to block the broad road which could be opened to uncorrected commission of sin, and for other just and reasonable motives known to us, we therefore, having taken counsel with some of our venerable brothers among the cardinals of the Holy Roman Church, and also our own accord, and with certain knowledge of mature deliberations, with the plenitude of the apostolic power, to do hereby determine and have decreed that these same societies, companies, assemblies, meetings, congregations, conventions of Liberati, Tory, or Francs Freemasons, or whatever name they go by, are to be condemned and prohibited, and by our present constitution, valid forever. We do condemn and prohibit them. Number 3. Wherefore we command most strictly, and in virtue of holy obedience, all the faithful of whatever state, grade, condition, order, dignity, or preeminence, whether by clerical or lay, secular or regular, even those who are entitled to specific and individual mention, that none, under any pretext or for any reason, shall dare or presume to enter, propagate, or support these aforesaid societies, Liberi Morati, or Francs-Masons, or however else they are called, or to receive them in their houses or dwellings, or hide them, to be enrolled among them, join them, be present with them, give power, permission for them to meet elsewhere, to help them in any way, to give them any advice, encouragement, support, either openly or in secret, discreetly, indirectly, or their own or through others, nor are they to urge others or tell them in sight to persuade them to be enrolled in such societies or be counted among their number, or to be present in such societies or be counted among their number, or to be present in their system in any way. But they may stay completely clear of such societies, companies, assemblies, meetings, congregations, conventions under pain of excommunication for all those mentioned people, which is incurred by the very deed without any declaration being required, and from which no one can obtain the benefit or absolution other than at the hour of death, except through ourselves or the Roman pontiff at the time. Moreover, we desire and command that both bishops and prelates and other local ordinaries, as well as inquisitors for the heresy, shall investigate and proceed against transgressors of whatever state, grade, condition, order, dignity, or preeminence that they may be, and they are to pursue and punish them with condign penalties as being most suspect of heresy. To each and all of these we give and grant free faculty of calling upon the aid of the secular arm, should the need arise, for investigating and proceeding against those same transgressors, for pursuing and punishing them with fitting penalties. So that is the majority of the sections of Eminenti, apostolatus, specula. The first condemnation against Freemasonry. So there is a lot there. Let's try to, as the cool kids say, unpack some of it. So you heard in the encyclical Pope Clement XII talk about things that have come to their knowledge. Right? And so let's get some historical context of some of what's going on here. Right? So the major concern is that Freemasonry is a borderless secret society. It's a society without borders. Okay. And it has some sort of governance, has a structure that translates throughout the known world. Okay. And so there's no one can govern these Freemasons. No one can tell them what to do, because as Pope Clement XII says, they have their own laws which govern them. Okay. So they're not bound to the state or to the church. It's borderless. Right? Second, they're teaching things that are contrary to the faith. And so how does Pope Clement know this? Well, we can go back to our class on Anderson's Constitution from 1723. Pope Clement would have been aware of that. It's a public document. It's been by this time published. No, not yet. It wouldn't have been published. It is the first document that's published in the United States by Benjamin Franklin, but I don't think not yet. But it is a public document that Pope Clement the 12th would have been aware of. Also, he's quite aware, as he say in his papal bull, of the grievous hosts and punishments, these oaths and obligations. Right? And how would he have known these things? Well, as we said, and as I said in a previous course, the exposés were quite the thing in Europe. There were people who did not like Freemasons. They didn't like, they were on many counts. They didn't like them as a secret society. They didn't like how they were bringing people of different religions together, pretending to be some sort of harmony, establishing basically a new religion that's greater than every other religion. So Freemasonry had its enemies, and these people would publish these exposés, and there were quite a number of them floating around. Starting earlier from 1724. And if you have my book, in the back of it, you can see one of those exposés. It's called Masonry Dissected by Pritchard. It's from 1730. Probably one of the most popular ones. So Pope Clement XII, he's aware of these things. So there's that background. Also, as you heard in this encyclical, that this isn't a Catholic Church coming in just 21 years later, just I would say officiously or preemptively, without any acting on its own, although it can, acting on its own to ban Freemasonry. Right? No, these have been things that were welling up in society, as Pope Clement XII says, that other countries and cities and governments had already put the hammer down on Freemasonry. They had already saw the threat of this exports from England. They saw the disruption it was causing in society, the suspicion that it was arousing with these Freemasons meeting in secret. What are they doing, right? In the revelry, sometimes it's a bunch of debauchery, drinking, whoring around with women and types of things like this. So it was becoming quite a disturbance throughout Europe. And so Pope Clement XII, he's hearing all this. Remind you, he's blind. He's not reading this in the paper, but he's hearing it from his advisors, from Neri, his nephew. And so it's quite the thing that the Pope finds cause to, okay, the church needs to respond to this now. What does the church need to say? And we have to understand, of course, the church was being solicited to say something, because it wasn't enough for governments just to put the hammer down. So the church at this time still has some measure of influence. Not the type of influence it may have had at one time prior to anti-popes, but it still has some influence. It still has some say, has some measure of weight when the Pope issues a papal bull. So in church and in laws of society, societal laws still have more weight when they're backed by what the church is saying is against the law. So these requests are bubbling up. These rumors are bubbling up. So Pope Clement XII, here in the 8th year of his papacy, 2 years before he dies, bedridden and blind, steps in to do something. Right? So here's some of the background, some of the things that were going on. So Freemasonry is a border society, in their allies exporting the Glorious Revolution of 1688. So the Glorious Revolution is when parliamentary rule came to England, right? And so so this is a threat to the monarchy. This idea that of people voting, people appointing their leaders. So there was a fear of the English people exporting this, and if they thought Freemasonry was part of this plot to export revolution and destroy the monarchy, which the Catholic Church is concerned about, because the monarchs, the princes, the kings, the queens are quite the friend of the Catholic Church. They protect it, they defend it. That's where the Catholic Church doesn't have really an army of its own on its own necessarily, but it gets its weight in from secular powers, and the church has land that it needs to protect. So, and we're going to see how this plays out in the future as well, with this exportation of Freemasonry and the rule of the people in these revolutions. So this is quite the concern. So 3 years prior to the Catholic Church issuing its prohibition against Freemasonry, a proclamation was issued at The Hague. So 3 years prior to Eminenti, a proclamation was issued at The Hague on December 12, 1735 by the President of the Council of Holland, Zeeland, and Friesland, stating that, quote, certain persons here at The Hague, under the specious pretense of belonging to a so-called fraternity of Freemasons, meeting together under a Grand Master, have formed an illegal association. For it is in no way to be supposed that the study of architecture is the sole principal object of their meetings, unquote. The proclamation cited that the real objective behind these secret meetings was faction and debauchery, and for this reason they are illegal. The action required by this proclamation called for law enforcement authorities to prevent such meetings from being held, and anyone who allowed a room in their house to be used as Freemason meeting was committing an offense. So this is at The Hague in 1735. So these are the type of things that were going on in Europe at the time before the Pope issues an Eminenti. Here's another one. By 1736, remember, an Eminenti is published in 1738. We say by 1736 in Paris, France, a number of Freemasons had increased to the point of having 9 different lodges. Now, mind you, A regular lodge needs 8 people just to open up a meeting. So the minimum number is 8 for at least for a lodge of master masons where you want to meet. The lower degrees, entered apprentice and fellowcraft, you need a lower number to meet. I think fellowcraft maybe 7, entered apprentice maybe 5. Okay, but so minimum number 8. Yet here, that's just a minimum number. So lodge really isn't operating well. It just has a minimum number meet. So, but here in Paris, you have 9 lodges. But of course, Paris is a large city. But it shows that this idea is spreading. So among those numbers were the Prince of Cincy and all the dukes of France and even Count Marabas. By March 29, 1737, the year before Eminenti, the police of Paris had forbidden taverns and meeting houses from house hosting Masonic meetings due to a great feast. This is probably a Grand Lodge session, right? Maybe the Freemasons had all met for Grand Lodge session, so all the Freemasons gathered there to meet. And had caused a very much noticeable degree of property damage. In contrast, the Florentine Freemasons were much quieter, but in 1737 had nonetheless earned a visit from the Holy Inquisitor, who was sent there by Pope Clement XII to persecute them at the request of the Duke of Tuscany. This persecution went nowhere, however, after Francis Stephen, Duke of Lorraine, succeeded him upon death, and that same year, Francis' initiation into Freemasonry at The Hague in 1731 had been widely reported in the press of England. So these are those things that we're talking about were bubbling up, right, to Clement XII, and who had initially just tried to send an office of the Inquisitor, right, the future Congregation Doctrine and Faith, to put the hammer down. Right, it wasn't successful. So this is part of the reason why it's important to issue a papal bull. So in Eminenti, what you heard were what I classify as 2 religious objections and 2 political objections against Freemasonry. And you'll see the next class in Provatus Romarum that Benedict the 14th, he'll see that there's 6 reasons. Okay, but here I think there's 4 that you can clearly discern. So Pope Clement II's first 2 motives behind Eminenti apostolatus specula clearly concerns the threats that Freemasonry poses in the worldview of Catholicism through its promotion of indifferentism, secularism, and relativism. And I should also probably include here naturalism. The Catholic Church firmly holds that she alone was established by Christ Jesus through the apostles to be the center union of all people, and that there's no salvation outside of his one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Juxtaposed to this orthodoxy to faith is a teaching of Freemasonry that it is a universal religion and the center of union and a means of facilitating true friendship among persons that have remained at a perpetual distance. This is directly from Anderson's Constitution. Both of these concepts, both Freemasonry and Catholicism, both of them cannot be true. Only one of them can be the center of union. Only one of them can be the means of uniting in peace and harmony in the world. There's not enough space in God's creation for both Freemasonry and Catholicism to exist. So the first theological reason we find in Eminenti is that Freemasonry is an error, vice, danger, and a disturbance in the Catholic Church. Being such, the Orthodox religion needs to be kept free from it, lest Freemasonry breaks into the household of God like thieves, like foxes, to destroy the vineyard. Freemasonry caters towards, relies on, established by the appearance of naturalism, natural virtue, and that as well indifferentism. And by its own law, it obligates men by an oath on the Bible and by a host of grievous punishments in silence about what they do in secret. So those are the theological reasons. The issue of naturalism, indifferentism, we even throwing some humanism here. a lot of isms, all of which the church has condemned in a negative sense. And so for these reasons, the Freemasonry is an error, a danger, and a vice. Then are the political reasons that you heard. I'll have to upload a new slide I see here. It don't look like the new one has been caught up in here, so I apologize about that. But download the others, the slide I'll upload. I'll turn into a PDF. So there's two political objections aside from Pope Clement II's two religious objections. There are two others that concern the threats that Freemasonry as a parliamentary ruled English export poses to the temporal state. First, being that the meetings of Freemasonry take place in secret, they lack transparency. The lack of transparency that causes a rumor. Due to this, the faithful have great suspicions about it. So the meetings take place in secret. There's a lack of transparency and cause rumors. So societies like these, they disturb the peace and the temporal state and well-being of souls. So those are two political reasons that basically Freemasonry is problematic because it's looking to export parliamentary rule. And the people do not know, where all these meetings of Freemasons are taking place. People do not know what's going on in secret. Right? There's no transparency and all this stuff. It causes rumors, suspicion, because the people are already concerned about threats against the monarchy and revolution spreading. And so because of this, these societies, they disturb the peace and temporal states and the well-being of souls. So again, the church is what Christ has given us to be our source of peace and harmony in him. Okay. And so with Freemasonry is bringing this confusion, this disruption, and it's inveighing against what Christ has established the church for. So those are two political reasons. So what is the legacy of Eminenti apostolatus specula? What is his contribution? What is his legacy? Well, you may have guessed that from the way when Pope Clement XII sent the Holy Inquisitor to suppress Freemasonry, that and how it was basically just flatly ignored there in Florence, that his papal bull, it would have been tried to be used by some authorities, but have been largely ignored by the people. Okay, so clearly this is a time. Who does this papal bull go to? Well, it goes to as many people in power, bishops, kings, potentates, mayors, as many people in power, but it's not something widely read by the people. They may have heard about it, all right? But clearly this is a different time. And there's still some tension. Of course, the papacy is a bit weakened. How much authority does the Pope have? Who is a greater authority? Is it a state or is it a church? There was some tension there. Okay, so and so that was one issue. Why the legacy of enmity is bothersome in a sense. Right? Here is the Pope issuing a papal bull, which by all standards, and which we'll see later, is infallible. It is the law of the church. And he says that this law is binding forever under the pain of excommunication. Not only can you not be a Freemason, but as it says in the papal bull that you can't even associate in any way. You can't rent them a room. You can't talk to them. You cannot encourage them. There's no room whatsoever by which Freemasonry can be any part of your daily activity under the pain of excommunication. So this was a broad stroke to just get Freemasonry, any smell of it, out of the church, out of the lives of Catholics. Yet we're going to be dealing with this for the next few hundred years. Even today, you have people in the church, cardinals, who people know are Freemasons, write books about it. So, the legacy of this, in Clement XII may have eventually gotten around to this, but did not. To really empower and put his full weight behind the holy office of the Inquisition and just have a wide-ranging inquisition against Freemasonry, to root out any smell of Freemasonry in the church, root out every person in the church who was a Freemason. And this office of Inquisition, this duty Inquisition should have continued on, in every year of the church, but it didn't. All right, so Eminenti was a good papal bull. It said exactly what it needed to say. It was just never funded. Right? It was never strongly enforced. And we see this sometimes with laws in the government. They issue a law or a president issues an edict. But it's never funded, right? So it's kind of like building a wall. Yeah, let's build a wall. Great idea. Need some money to do it, right? It's never really funded. Pope successors never really get behind it strongly with funding or empowering the office of the Inquisition. So, but it is the first magisterial teaching against Freemasonry, that we should say. Is cited directly in future prohibitions. All right, so no future prohibition against Freemasonry ever contradicts this one. Probably until we get into the canon laws, maybe we could say that. But no pope has ever contradicted a previous pope, especially Clement, on this issue. Again, it's promulgated just 21 years after the founding of Mother Grand Lodge in England. By virtue of this teaching being consistently and explicitly repeated by 7 different popes after it was first promulgated by Pope Clement XII, including in 2 canon laws over the span of nearly 2.5 centuries, is not arguably that in Eminenti, apostolatus, specula, prohibitions against Freemasonry rightly belongs in the body of dogmatic teachings of the Catholic Church. Yet, as whether this apostolic constitution was another pre-Vatican II exercise of papal infallibility is arguable, Clement does meet most of the criteria that the First Vatican Council set forth, such as Eminenti does define what Freemasonry is. It does remind us of Pope Clement XII's 1950 encyclical on the Assumption of the Blessed Mary in regard to how other bishops were consulted about this matter. Right, he says that in Eminenti that we've heard, we've discussed this, and how there's appeal to the sense of the faithful. Right, that the faithful has found this to be an issue. So there's this sensus fidelium. It does make a clear statement on apostolic authority, that by their duty and by their right. And it does argue through defining terms that this prohibition against Freemasonry is a matter of faith and morals. Okay, so this is not outside, argues that this is not outside the purview of the Pope. So the only criteria is missing in comparison to how it was exercised by Blessed Pius IX in 1854 and Pope Pius XII, is that this was not issued from the literal throne of St. Peter ex cathedra, from the Peter's Basilica. Rather, it was promulgated from the throne of Saint Mary Major. So really, that's the only missing criteria. But as we'll see later, with later popes will take this papal bull, insert it into their encyclical, and pronounce it, promulgate it from the seat of Peter. So eventually, this encyclical does become part of a body of work that we can say, okay, according to what First Vatican Council set forth, this document would have been infallible. It meets all the criteria. So it doesn't meet it here because of that one thing, but it will meet it later because future popes would take this very encyclical and put it in this papal bull and put it in their encyclical. So this is an infallible teaching of the Catholic Church by all definitions, just never enforced, never funded, as I say. So in our next session, we take a look at Prohibition Romanorum. And the objective of this fifth lecture is to ground the student in the focus of Pope Benedict XIV's encyclical, which was to reiterate an enmity to countries that had ignored it. So this is a big issue, people ignoring the teachings of the Catholic Church on the issue of Freemasonry. But that's the class for now. We'll close here. Make sure you take the quiz and proceed to the next class, and I will see you there. Thank you.